The Power Moms Network, empowering moms to lift the world.
Welcome. I'm Riley Karsh.
I'm Tova Kopan.
We are thrilled to bring you the We Go Boldly podcast.
Let's talk big burning questions, life changes, and maybe a bit of personal business.
Let's be bold and brave together. Are you ready?
I am. Here comes the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to We Go Boldly, the podcast, where we celebrate women stepping into their power and living their most authentic lives. We are also thrilled to be a part of the Power Moms Network. At Power Moms Network, we are empowering moms and creating a community of mothers mentoring other moms to greatness. Check it out whenever you can. You can find us online, anywhere you listen to podcasts, all the good places. We would love for you to join us over at Power Moms Network. Before we dive into more of season 12's writing your own story topic, I want to remind everyone that we have an incredible opportunity for you guys to join us live every week in our We Go Boldly Weekly Women's Circle. It is a place of empowerment, a place of networking, a place of nurturing. It's all the good things. And we would love to have you there. You can find out more information by going to our website at goboldlyinitiative.com/weekly circle. And you can sign up right there on our website. It is one of the best parts of my week, and we would love to have you join us. So all of that being said, it is season 12, as you all know already. Today, we are going to talk about boundaries, one of our favorite topics around here. Before we dive into the fun of all of that, let me say hello to Tova, get her on the show, and get us moving forward. How are you doing today, Tova? What's going on?
So I feel like that question is so hard to answer these days.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's like, how am I doing? Well, my kids didn't fight before school. Everybody was on time. The Eagles still won the Super Bowl.
Nobody took it
Um,
away.
that's awesome. I'm concerned about the state of our country,
Fascism.
fascism, the
That's a
fall of
general thing.
democracy, so many things,
Mm-hmm.
which is actually why I'm really excited to talk about today, the topics today.
Yeah. Yep.
And because it's not just our usual conversation about boundaries, although it is a conversation about boundaries.
Yeah.
Um, but I had my therapy yesterday, and it's interesting because we have our women's circle on Wednesday
Mm-hmm.
and then our therapy on Thursday. So when she's like, "What are we going to talk about this week?" I'm often like, "Well, in circle yesterday,
Right.
this is what we talked about." But um, you know, I was saying I don't even know how sometimes to answer how am I doing? Because it's like, well, you know, living through existential crisis, I'm okay. I had a good breakfast. Blueberries were on sale this morning at the grocery store, so I had some fresh blueberries in my cottage cheese, which was like a treat,
Yeah.
you know. So that was fun. Um, like, I,
Yeah, I think there is no way to really answer how you're doing without and to answer it like in depth, honestly, without going through the litany of like, well, I'm living my life because my kids still need to eat. I
yeah,
still need to work. Bills still need to get paid. You know, I still need to go to my doctor's appointments. Like the normalness of life does not stop because we're surrounded by fires, right?
right.
And that's the craziest part of, well, it's not the craziest part. There's some real whoppers out there, but like it's one of the really weird parts about living through history, right? Like about
Yeah,
living through a time that is clearly a pendulum swing, sort of all those, big fancy ways we talk about like big pivot moments in history. And it's happening right now. And we are self aware and world aware enough to know that it is happening right now. Um, So that I think that gets in the way of an honest answer, because most people ask you, like I ask you and I want to know your honest answer. Most people ask you and they're like, please just tell me that, you're fine.
Well, it's funny because the other day, so my son's elementary school has been dealing with lice for months and months and months.
Mm-hmm.
And like I think we all just need to I think go in the dryer. Like we all just need to go in the dryer, I think is the only solution at this point. And I you know, a friend of mine ran into another mom just after drop off or something. And the mom, who did not vote the same way we all voted, was like, "Oh my gosh, isn't this all so crazy?" And my mind, and the friend was like, "What? Oh, the lice. Yes, the lice are crazy." And she and then she immediately called me and was like, I had to take a minute because she doesn't, she's not stressed about the same things we're stressed about. Like
Right.
for her, it's the lice. But like today, this morning, I didn't do a good job of setting energetic boundaries. And that's something that like we talked about on during Circle this week about how
Mm-hmm.
one of my goals is to really figure out how to stay engaged and not just stay engaged with the news, but stay engaged, have conversations with people. If people are willing to have conversations with me where we have opposing viewpoints, stick my neck out there and have conversations with them because, you know, I don't have a transgender child. So if somebody's willing to talk to me about it, I want to talk to about it with them because I don't have that personal experience. And a mom who is dealing with that with her child should not have to have that
Yeah.
conversation, but I can. But I still need to protect my own energy. And
Right.
this morning I got up early and I did yoga and I watched Suits, which is what I'm binging right now. And I, but I was listening to a podcast. I was listening to Pod Save the World because I wanted to hear what they had to say about Ukraine and Munich. And, I chose to step into this. I recognize that. And then um, I was looking at Instagram as I'm organizing the socks, which was, a very big, exciting moment in my life because, like, currently right now we have like a reasonable number of socks in our house, and every sock has a pair, and every sock fits everybody's feet in this house. It's a
Mm-hmm.
very personally exciting moment, really a triumph in our home. And, but I was scrolling, Instagram while I'm sorting socks, and it just came crashing down. And I kind of put my head in my hands. And my oldest son, was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No, no, I'm fine. I'm fine." And then a little bit later, I said, I said, I am fine, but also like I was not setting a boundary. I needed to put my phone down. And as soon as he asked me, I did put my phone down. I said, I was not setting a good energy boundary, and I was not separating myself enough, and I was letting it affect me. And it's very hard because as we all know, we are trying, as you just said, we are trying to parent and we are trying to be engaged with our kids, and our concern about the state of, the postal system. Like, I've never really been worried about the postal system existing until today. I mean, I've been worried about stamp pricing increases, but like I've not been worried about like the actual existence of the postal system until today. And but like I can't go too deep in that unless I'm going to snap at my kid. I don't want it to affect how I parent, or whether I can have the anxiety go too high and then I can't do my job. Because as you
Yeah.
said, we have to feed our kids, and we have to not just feed them, but engage with them and nurture them and hug them and like
Yeah.
theoretically enjoy them.
Yes, to all of that. I think even more importantly and more specific to writing your own story, I keep reading, and people say this all the time. I'm sure I've said it a million times. Like, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of everyone else, blah, 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 blah. And people say that to moms, particularly all the time, right? And that's great and true and good and all those things. However, it is not at the core of writing your own story. You cannot take care of yourself
Yeah.
if you are not setting boundaries, right? Especially now, especially if you're an empathetic person who cares about other human beings and you're watching the fall of democracy and people being deported and sent to jail and like all kinds of insanity, right? Like if you fall into that so deep that you're not able to function, yeah, you can't take care of your kids and all those other people, but it also harms yourself. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that it's a worthwhile endeavor to take care of yourself for yourself, whether it's for other people in addition, whatever. But we need to take care of ourselves for ourselves. You also can't keep fighting the good fight if you
Yeah.
fall into despair. We talked about this last week. If you fall, and I've been there multiple times in the last, I don't know, it's only been like a month, which is horrifying. Um, and we're gonna have those moments, and we're gonna have those like head in the hands. What is happening? This is bananas. Doesn't anyone care? Like where you fall down the rabbit hole of just being like enraged and horrified and sad and all those feelings. And it's okay to have those moments. And the reason we have boundaries though is so that we can
Yeah.
like stop those moments, right? So we can have that moment and then move forward with making dinner or making ourselves get in the shower or going to work or reading a good book, or engaging in fighting against, the horrible things that are happening. We can't do any of those things if we're not doing any self-care, and boundaries at their heart are self-care.
Well, and let me also be clear, when I talk about wanting to like engage in my kid's life, it is selfish. Like,
Yeah.
I've always wanted to be a mom, and I don't want my experience of being a mom. That is something that I've always wanted to do, that I have made sacrifices to do, like relationship sacrifices, career sacrifices. Like, let's not pretend that we haven't. Like,
Yeah.
are there choices that I've made willingly and happily, but they are choices and sacrifices that so that I could be in their lives, that this is the path that I chose. I don't begrudge moms who have chosen different paths. That is great. But this is the choice that these are the choices that I have made because this is the type of parent that I have wanted to be.
Yeah.
And I'll be damned if I'm letting fascism get in the way of me engaging in their lives. Like, and so, at least as long as I can. And so, like, it is not just for them that I'm saying that I want to engage. It's that part of me writing my story is saying, I have a almost 9-year-old, 11, and a 13-year-old. If we are lucky, we will only have, 3 years and 11 months left of this presidency. And that is magical times in their lives.
Mhm.
Like, that are precious times of their childhood. And I will not let them steal it.
Yeah. And I think, my larger point is that for anyone listening who is not a parent, right? This still applies to you. For anyone
Yes.
listening who is a parent and their kids are grown and out of their homes and it's a different experience, there's just so many people who might be engaging in this topic. And I want everyone to recognize that, like, setting boundaries for yourself without needing to take care of anyone else is still a really important thing to do.
Yeah.
So we need to take a quick break because we've been chatting for a while already. Um, so we're going to do that. When we come back, we'll talk about why a little more in depth about why boundaries and all of this stuff relates to writing your own story. So we will be right back after this break. Well, hey there, dream chaser. Are you ready to make the next 12 months of your life unforgettable? Introducing the Year of You, a groundbreaking new goal system group that's about to redefine the way we approach personal growth. Join us with a community of like-minded individuals committed to unlocking their full potential. With expert guidance, personalized strategies, kind-hearted accountability, and a supportive network, the Year of You is more than just a goal-setting group. It's a whole movement. Don't just dream about it, achieve it. Click in the link in our show notes or go ahead and visit us at goboldlyinitiative.com/year review to learn more today. Let's embark on a transformative journey together towards becoming the best versions we can be. The Year Review, where your goals become reality. Okay, so welcome back to the show. Before the break, we were chatting about sort of how boundaries come into play in our own lives. And I want to get us into sort of a broader scale so we can talk to the range of folks who might be listening about why boundaries relate to your writing of your own story. Like why are we even talking about this? And it's not just boundaries, but I think, as you have here in the outline, Tova, it's also about understanding your priorities, like you were just
Yeah.
mentioning, which I think is important. And then having a support system to help you kind of maintain those boundaries in a healthy way. So you all know what boundaries are. But just to just to refresh everyone's memories, boundaries are about keeping yourself safe in a lot of ways. So you can think of it like a fence, I guess. But it's also about making choices about your life for yourself without giving in to like whatever is going on around you. So, guarding your time, guarding your mental health, sharing your time, right? Like it doesn't have to be said in the negative. It can be said in the positive, right? Boundaries are morality neutral, I think.
Yeah.
So, you can think of it in that sense of what are my values? What are my priorities? What is my purpose, as we've talked about? And how do all of those things align with my boundaries and what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so somehow it was interesting because we've done a lot of research about boundaries and we've talked a lot about boundaries, but by combining it with this concept of your priorities,
Mm-hmm.
the articles that I read were just slightly different and the way that they wrote about boundaries were a little different. And so I liked a couple ways that they positioned boundaries, which was that first of all they go both ways. And to that respect, like I always feel really safe in relationships when I'm with people who set strong boundaries. I really love being with people who are good at setting boundaries. And um I think I now can reflect on the fact that part of it was good because I never, for a long time, set boundaries myself. So it was like, oh, thank God somebody's setting a boundary. But now I appreciate that because I know I can trust what they're saying and things like that. But I like this idea of of doing no harm. That the boundaries is really about doing no harm to yourself. You're doing no harm to others, and you're not letting anyone do any harm to you. But it's this idea of just of that is what the boundary is about. It's about, you're not letting anyone hurt you, but you're not hurting anyone else, including yourself. Like you are taking care of yourself in this process as well. And I think that, you know, when we first joined this conversation, like the boundaries that I was talking about was the ones that I needed to set for myself. And I think that those are often the hardest ones to set.
Mm-hmm.
And when we are looking at this world, because the next section that I read was a lot about how there are so there's so few things that are in our control. And but identifying those small little things that are in your control, whether it is how often I allow myself to look at the phone. And, I can, like, if I'm going to spend an hour and a half listening to a podcast about foreign affairs, maybe I don't follow it up with 20 minutes of doom scrolling. Like, those are some value, right?
Right,
Like, that's probably not a good boundary. Like, that I did not have a good, healthy boundary right there.
right.
Um, and so I think that, learning where you can set those things for yourself to do no harm for yourself and to figure out in case that's not something that like resonates with you, who you're giving power to. And to me, that really goes back to that concept of like writing your own story. As
Yeah.
you're writing a story and you're writing the story of your life and you're figuring out the path that you're taking, the path that you're on and the journey you're on, and who is making the choices and the decisions as you write the story, the boundaries that you set throughout that story decides like where the I don't know if it's like where the power is coming from, but where the power to make those decisions come from.
Yeah, I think, in choosing to be in charge of your story, right? Because it's a choice. And like
Hmm.
at times we make a different choice, right? Like we've all been there where we're like, somebody else figure this out. I can't, I don't know what to do next. And I still get there sometimes, right? And I think that's normal and okay. But choosing to be the person in the driver's seat means setting real boundaries around your priorities and
Hmm.
what's important to you. And that's why we've kind of connected this to priorities, right? Is if you are wanting to sort of be the person in charge of your writing your story, you can't constantly say yes to everyone, right? You can't constantly give and give and give to things that aren't necessarily priorities for you. Maybe your priority is to be a helper, and that's great. But like at some point, right, you have to put a boundary around that and say, well, where can I help? And where am I just burning out? Or where am I like giving too much to everyone so that I'm not really giving anything to anyone? And I think that that is it just requires a level of self-awareness to recognize, okay, I've volunteered for too many things, or like I can't do every party at my kid's school, or I can't, take my mom to every appointment she needs to go to, or which is not, mom, if you're listening, I know I don't do that. um but like you can put boundaries around caregiving, you can put boundaries around work. And I'm not saying you won't lose your job from that. Like there are
Yeah.
employees that or employers that won't tolerate that, and you have to make some choices around where you're setting boundaries for your own life. And sometimes we set like softer boundaries, right? Like I have a lot of softer energetic boundaries because sometimes I'm like cool with letting people vent and like get their stuff out and like share and go, into the weeds of whatever's happening in their lives or things like that. And it's fine for me. And then other times I can't. Like I don't have the wherewithal to manage the other person's feelings. And so I think, there are energetic boundaries like that that are sort of more malleable, and you kind of pick and choose when you can do what. And the key to that is communication. And the key to that communication is having a receptive person on the other side. Um, and that's hard to find, I think, sometimes, but
Yeah, and I think it's also, a receptive person when you say that, it's someone who's listening, right? And is willing to listen to you. I think it's also very important to listen to yourself
mhm.
because you may be screaming internally like, I can't handle this anymore.
Yeah.
I need you to listen to a funny podcast. Why are you doing this? Like
Yeah.
um stop, put the podcast down or whatever it might be. Like I need humor, I need something else. I need you to unfollow that person or whatever it might be. And if you're not listening to yourself, then you're not setting a boundary that you need to set. And
Yeah.
I think, you started talking about priorities, and there's a reason that we wanted to include that in this conversation. And it is in line with the conversation that we had last week about um, having your purpose be based on your values,
Mhm.
because your priorities are based in your values. And now, I am struggling, I will admit, because I just started the book Essentialism and I had to return it before I finished it. So I've only read enough to be trouble. and not actually know how it ties up. But he talked about at the very beginning of the book, how apparently the origin of the word priority was that you just have one. That
Mm,
this idea of having multiple priorities is really something in the last like 150 years. So that I liked when you said like maybe your priority is to be a helper. But because I do think that we so often are like, oh, well, I have these three priorities. And it's like, well, priorities, because I looked up the definition, it actually means the most important thing.
right.
And so it's very hard to think about how you have multiple priorities. But I do think that if you are able to think about your values and your core values, which we talk about a lot, and you can narrow down to maybe one priority, which is terrifying because you're like, well, but I have to do this and I have to do that and I have to do this. But it does help you set some boundaries.
Yeah, I like that idea, and I like thinking of it in that values-based kind of terminology, right? Because yeah, priorities, I think in the common vernacular are things like my priority is to get my kids to school, and my prior which was a big priority today. Um, no, but my
Yes.
priority is to like make dinner every night. Like
Yeah.
it's very task oriented, whereas I
Yes.
think on larger scale, especially when we're talking about writing our own story and living through this horror that we're living through, priority is about values, and it's about like what is the most important value for you right now. And maybe it changes day by day, minute by minute, whatever. But like if you think of it in that terms, it takes away that like outcome oriented thinking, which the more I think about, the less I like focusing on outcome, and the more I like focusing on journey, right? And the idea that we're sort of moving through time in this nonlinear way, thinking about our values versus like I'm going to get this thing and I'm going to accomplish this one thing. Not that we can't have goals, we want goals, but like the more important part is the living of your values, the living of your story, whatever that story is.
Right. Right. And I mean, so some of my favorite books, when I think about my favorite books that I've been recently reading, are the books that are a collection. Usually there's a matriarch in the book. Even if she doesn't have any kids, she's like the matriarch of the
Mm,
book. And she's kind of like a curmudgeon, usually, or has some sort of like witch-like qualities. But
nice.
she's just like a weird old lady. Like, let's just be honest. And she kind of collects people, right?
Mhm.
And they all have these strange intertwining stories. And I've read quite a few of these recently. And they have, I mean, these are in different cultures and different backgrounds, but like this is like the essence of these stories.
Mm,
And the plots are, you know, not usually too intense. I mean, I think there is one where they're trying to solve a murder and it kind of like falls flat. Like it's like no one really cares because like the guy that got murdered, like, no one liked him. But like, um, but at the end, like it kind of just ends like these stories. And I think that's kind of the point, right? Like,
yeah.
most people's lives don't end with a bang. They they end. It's an illness, or I mean often it's an illness that's the result of, hopefully if you're lucky, being very, very old.
Right.
And but it's the people you've picked up along the way. And if you're lucky, you've become a weird old witchy curmudgeony old lady. If you've made it that long. And like those are my favorite stories, reading how these weird, funny women like pick up these people, and they because they're old and wise, they can make these beautiful connections in these people's lives because they see
Right.
things that these other people don't. And as I look at writing our stories, and I think we're living in a time where we've been saying for the last 4 years that you have very little control. And now it's like, oh, we have even less control than we thought we did.
Hmm.
And, yesterday I called my congressperson's office like I do every day. And with the senator's office, I always get a voicemail. But with the congressperson, I get a person. And I finally was like, are you the same person I talk to every day? And he's like, yes. And I was like, can I have your name? Because this just seems impersonal. Um, so I got his name. But, that's something I can control, right?
Hmm.
I can speak to somebody every day and I can pick one thing that I want to talk about. And usually I'm like, in addition to the general constitutional crisis and chaos, this is the one thing I'm concerned about today. But there's just so much we can't control, but we can control living authentically and in alignment with our values
Yeah.
and making sure it all stays like, I know I just said in alignment, but I'm going to say it again, like in alignment
Yeah.
and working on setting those boundaries, whether they're the big ones, like I'm not going to take a job that's against something that I believe in, or just
Right.
the as you described, the softer boundaries that protect our energy and protect our space, to
Yeah.
ensure that, each day that we get through is a little easier if we can make it that way, because the days are really hard. And
Yeah.
whether they
Yeah.
are really hard because you are in fact going through a traumatic experience, or they're really hard because you're going through a historically traumatic time, they're hard.
Right. Right. And I think, again, I agree with all of that. But I also think, and I also think, like, if you are in a position where it is safe enough for you, both physically and emotionally, to set some hard boundaries around what you're willing to tolerate in your life and what you're not. I think this is, a great time to start doing that. There are people that have been in our lives that we need to no longer have in our lives, and they need to know that their decisions have consequences and that their belief systems, are not our belief systems. And it's okay to tell those people, thanks, but no thanks. We're not going to align anymore. I've had to do that with several people. I've done it outwardly, I've done it silently. Um, and the time for being nice is not now, right? Like being nice about stuff. It's not, I don't know. There are people who are unsafe for my family and I don't need them in my life. And I think it's important to recognize that that is also a boundary and you are allowed to set it, and it does not make you a bad person and it doesn't make you mean or unkind. It means you're protecting, yourself or your family or people you care about. And I think it's okay. Like I don't know if it's just sometimes people need permission and I want to give that permission, but like you don't have to allow those people in your lives if you don't want to. You don't have to try and change their minds.
So I think that's a great segue. So
Mm.
we're going to take a break and then let's talk about the people that I don't like to use the word should, but that we should seek out to have in our lives to help us support our values and our priorities and set these boundaries. So let's just take a quick break and we will be right back. Hey, pod friends, it's us again. Looking for a place to collaborate, an opportunity to share your knowledge? Have you been working so hard on a podcast, book, course, product, or retreat? Do you have insights that could light up our podcast? Well, we want to hear from you. We would love to support you in all that you are and do. Join us at Go Boldly Initiative, where we celebrate diverse perspectives and share the wisdom of our incredible community. Whether you're an expert, a hobbyist, or simply love learning, we invite you to reach out with your ideas. Visit our website at goboldlyinitiative.com/podcast guests to pitch the show or shoot us an email at hello@goboldlyinitiative.com to talk all things collaboration, advertising, and affiliation opportunities. Become part of our growing family. Let's make learning an adventure together. So, welcome back. And we ended with you reminding us that it is okay to let go of people that are no longer serving us.
That's such a
Um,
nice way to put it.
yeah. Just I always picture that. I know it's not like It sounds awful, but I picture Leonardo DiCaprio just like slipping off
Off the
the
door.
door. Yeah. Um, but to that end, though, there are people that can help us and help us in so many ways, and that we can help them,
Yeah.
and that us bringing kindness and good things to their lives can um, can benefit them, right?
Yeah.
And that, being with each other. And I don't know if you haven't, this is now coming out a week later than when it was first made the rounds on the internet. But if you haven't listened to the governor of Illinois' speech, which
Oh my God,
Riley,
it's
you first
incredible.
shared with me,
Hmm.
but he had a great reminder, which is, I mean, not to boil it all down into a moment, but like essentially when you give up and to basically say we've lost, that's when you've lost,
Right.
right? And I think part of not losing and not giving up um is having community and
Yeah.
having people that bring you joy and bring you hope and coming together. And in case you need some research, because we haven't brought a lot of research up today, studies show um, that isolation and loneliness can be as damaging as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. On the flip side, strong social ties are linked to a 50% increased chance of living longer. And interestingly enough, I saw a tweet or something recently where some dude bro was critiquing a woman and was like, this is why women in their 30s are going to get cats and they're all going to die by themselves. And some person interjected, I know. Riley just made a face if you're not watching on YouTube. But some funeral director interjected and said, actually, when women die, there's a large community that comes with them
And their cats.
and supports them. Yeah, and their cats. But when men die, sadly enough, oftentimes the only people that are there to bury them are myself and the driver.
Right.
So I did not mean to throw men under the bus. It is not a time for that. I mean, it is in fact a time for that. I misspoke, but your community can include men, is my point.
Yeah.
That's okay. But my point is that women, we are great at community.
Yeah.
And I think we are getting better and better at it. Um, like we, listen, there are women among us who are not so good at it, and we know who they are, right? But I think that to a woman, we are getting better at calling out the nonsense and standing up for each other. And I was, but just before this, I was listening to Kylie Kelsey's podcast, and she was on Call Your Daddy last week, and she talked about how she was out on a double date and there was food served at Taylor Swift's or something, and she couldn't eat it because she was like 8 weeks pregnant. She couldn't eat anything but crackers. And apparently Parade magazine or parade.com or something ran an article about how Kelsey refused to eat Taylor Swift's home cooked meal. And Kylie was like, please, like, why are you pitting women against women? This is ridiculous. Like, any pregnant woman or woman who is pregnant can tell you that there are times where the only thing you can eat are crackers.
Yeah, if you're
Like,
lucky.
yeah, exactly. And she's like, that's all. That's all that is.
But also,
Like,
let's just talk about how the whole point of pitting women against women is about making money and taking control. Like,
right.
it is not about like some nefarious I care if women like each other. It's I want to control people and I want to make money. And
Yeah.
that's it. And like I'm clearly angry. Like I've been angry
Well,
for a
but I
long
just
time, but like
appreciate
this is just
like
obnoxious.
10 or 20 years ago, a woman, I mean, really the reason she wanted a platform for a podcast was to be able to call people out and be like, no,
Yeah.
if you're going to talk about my family, I'm going to talk back.
Yeah.
And anyway, the point is, women are great. And
Hmm.
there are men who are great too. I don't want to just throw them all under the bus.
People are generally I want to say people are great, but they're
There
not.
are good
There
people.
are very good people. And, I want to mention because we're talking about community and building community, and there's so many ways to do that. And I want to encourage you all to make space to be surprised by people because,
I like that.
personally, there are people in my life now who, I don't know, a few years ago, I would have been like, oh, I don't know about that person. I don't think our values align. I don't think we think the same things. And through circumstance and stuff happening and whatever going on in their lives, it turns out we do align and they are like now a part of my community. Maybe we're not best friends because there's places where, we're like, oh, I don't know about that. But there are people who will surprise you in the best ways, and then there are people who will surprise you in bad ways. But make room for that opportunity so you can create a diverse, like holistic, larger community that makes sense and that not only gives you support but helps you grow, right? Because we don't want to be in an echo chamber where we don't learn anything or we never, like, everybody's the same as us. There's some weird Stepford Wives situation. We want people who are different, who have different thoughts. It's that, we want to align on basic values, right? And human rights, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that that's why, we have talked a lot this season about rooting things in your values, your core values. And that's, I think, where the magic happens
Mm-hmm.
because I do believe that like there right now it is sort of a partisan issue, but like in yesteryear, maybe it doesn't have to be a partisan issue. And I guess it doesn't even really because they're independents. There's a variety of people out there.
I think
It's a weird
it's a
time.
values issue.
It's a values issue,
It's
right?
not really
Yeah,
anything more than that.
yeah, and but there can be people who are totally different and totally different walks of life. And, you know, there's a kid, I see it pop up every once in a while on Instagram, and it's this white guy, and I don't know if he's a farmer. He's wearing a Carhartt jacket, so I'm making a huge
Big
generalization.
big assumptions. That's all right.
Yeah, but he talks about it's one of those like when were you radicalized?
Yeah.
And it was like when his conservative father went to a school board meeting and all of his community was pushing back against school lunches. And his father was like, I needed free lunch when I was a kid, and I support free lunch.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you might not agree with that kid with 500 different other things, but you share these values that
Right.
like if you can afford to give a kid a lunch who needs a lunch, you should give the kid a lunch. Like this is not complicated.
No.
Um, and I think that, you can find community with as an introvert. Like there are still spaces where you can find people who have shared values. If it needs to be on the internet, it can be on the internet. Like it can be in real, quote, real life, in-person life. You
Mm-hmm.
can find quiet places to have community. Like I think there's some really neat volunteer opportunities where you don't have to talk to people, but you can all be together.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know, organize like you can volunteer at a library and be organizing books and like not actually have to talk to anybody. But there's something about being with other people, but also not running your social battery down.
Yeah.
Like, like there's space for all of us if you seek it out to be in community with other people.
Right.
And it does good things for you physically. Like the reason it counteracts loneliness is because of reducing stress hormones, of giving you good hormones like oxytocin. Um, it helps you with habits. It helps, it's a good thing. And I also think that we've talked a lot about it's very hard to be hopeful when you're in the depths of despair, as Anne of Green Gables might say. I don't know if she says depths or pits, but either way, when you're in despair,
Yeah.
um, it's hard to do that for a long time when you have a strong support group because they notice.
Right.
You need to have people around you who will notice if you're there. And either they're with you, and so you're doing an activity that can help lift you up, or they'll notice that you need to be doing an activity that can help lift you up.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
one of the two.
and we've also talked about how joy and laughter and positivity and things like that can be a part of resistance, right? Like
Yes.
they want us to fall apart, right? That's the goal. And so the more joy we can create, the more time we can spend in laughter, the better. And I'm not suggesting that like we do that and then ignore, all the things going on. You can't really do that. But you can find moments of joy. You can find moments of laughter. I think Toby, you're really good at this in the like sense of, okay, I'm going to watch the show and it's going to make me laugh and I'm going to have this time for my sort of joy battery to be refilled, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think we talked about this maybe last week or the week before. I think you can feel guilty sometimes if you're a person who's worried, right? Like you can feel some level of guilt or shame around having good moments, but like we can't we can't live in that despair space, right? It's not sustainable. And it's okay to experience life and to still be happy and joyous and engaged in your day-to-day living and writing your own story, and what that's going to look like. And like you said at the very beginning of this whole conversation, like I remember, my son was born in 2016 and like one of the first events he went to was a women's march. And like his first 4 years of life are marked by the turmoil of that administration and my engagement in politics and activism and advocacy and all of those things. And there are times that I look back and I'm like, oh, I spent too much, I like gave too much of myself to one and not the other. And so, whether that's true or not, I don't, who knows. But what I don't want is to look back at this time and be like, I didn't do anything or I did too much. You want to like try to balance it out. And that's where boundaries come into play in how you sort of react to the world around you and how you make those choices and how you decide your story is going to go.
Well, and I think you have to remember what you're fighting for.
Mm,
And that sometimes is joy and laughter and freedom. And, I was telling my kids today that the United States that I thought that the United States was when I was a kid in the 80s was not a real representation of what the United States was.
right.
Like, I thought we were always the good guys. And I thought that, I mean, and I said, we beat the Nazis and we were always the good guys. And my kids were like, well, we did beat the Nazis. And I said, we did do that. We did do that. And I said, but we weren't always the good guys. I said, we weren't even the good guys in our own country. Like, we built our country on the backs of enslaved people.
Right.
And there's so many places in the world that we weren't the good guys. And I said, but there were so many places in the world where we were the good guys
Right.
and that we showed up and we set up clinics. And, I went through all these things and I said, but we are in imperfect country, but we have I'm not going to give them have the potential to be better. And
Right.
like, you cannot give up hope. Like, you just cannot give up hope. It's just, it's not an option. And it is, I think when you sit by yourself, it is so easy to give it up. It's easy to give up joy. It's easy to give up laughter. It's easy to give up hope. And it is easy to get so discouraged. It is hard to do that around other people. It really is. And if you're around people who it's easy to do that with, boundaries need to be set and you
Yeah. I
need to find
mean,
different people.
or even if you don't have to, like, even
I don't
I
mean you
think
need
you
to
could
like,
just set boundaries, right? Like,
yeah,
there's been times where, you and I have been in groups and I've been like, I cannot talk about this anymore. Like
yeah.
I'll leave. That's fine. Or we need to move on to a different topic because I will get too bogged down in the misery of it. And I know that like I've hit my limit. Um, and I think that's okay. Like it's all right to say, I mean, obviously I think it's okay because I do it all the time, but it's all right to say to people, like, I just can't do this anymore. I mean, I say it to my husband all the time because he'll get on a soapbox and go for days. And I'm like, you know what? I need to stop this now. Like, I get that we're mad about this, but we need to know, like, this is unproductive at this point. Um, And that's what I was saying about energetic boundaries, right? You
Yeah.
need to set limits. Like there are days where I'm like, go for it, babe. Just like spout off. It's cool. I can listen. And then there's days where I'm like, you know what? Like if you talk one more second about, fascism and Italy and whatever day, like I just can't, like I can't take it anymore. Um, he's like very good at history, so sometimes it's very frustrating. um, but it's okay to set boundaries, right? Like it's okay to
Yeah.
take care of yourself. It's okay to find community that makes sense for you to like understand that your priorities don't have to be about accomplishing tasks on your to-do list. Your
Yeah.
priorities should be about, you know, what do you value? What where do you value things?
I think it's also okay, like, let's say your husband's way of processing all this is to talk about the historical relevance of everything that's
Yeah.
happening. And you know that he needs to get that out.
Mm-hmm.
You can say, I need you to stop. I can't take any more right now. Maybe don't phrase it that way. Be like, I can't take in anymore right now.
Right.
And then you go and you do something that will fill you back up.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can tag yourself back in. And you can say, like, or you can just have him call my dad. I mean, my dad would love to talk history with him.
Yeah, I should have him do that. Or he'll talk to my daughter about it.
Yeah.
They'll talk at length forever
But
and
like,
she'll
but
ask
like
all the
you can
questions.
though and go and like, I know your daughter's watching Modern Family now. Like you guys could
Yeah.
go watch that together and you can fill your laughter cup up. Like, and then you can go back and tag yourself in. And
Right.
it is a matter of figuring out like where are those energetic boundaries
Yeah.
and where do you have the people, I'm not gonna lie, I have some conspiratorial ideas about some things that like are a little out of the box.
Hmm.
But I have like one friend I've shared them with because like I can't have that like filled my head. Like I just can't. It cannot be in the
Yeah,
main
because
part of
then
my
it like
head.
then you're stuck in it and you're like, I can't get
Yeah,
out of
no,
this.
no,
I
no. And I'm like, and I've shared it with her because I was like, just in case it ends up being true, like I want someone to know that like I said it.
that I
I think
knew.
this is what
Yeah.
happened and I said it. But like I can't have this be like a mainstream idea in my life.
Right.
Um, so she's my conspiracy friend. But like I think that, you just even if it's even if you're an introvert, like we're not telling you like everybody needs to go to parties all the time. I hope that like that's very, very clear.
Yeah.
Um, but we do need to find support and
Hmm.
find people to lift you up. And it also can be um I talked about doom scrolling because sometimes that happens, but as much of my Instagram feed is positive, right, as it is negative, because it's if I am in the right headspace, right, it isn't politicians telling me all the bad things that are happening. Like, listen, is it Liz Warren on the floor, like in the basement of the Senate going, "Oh my God, all this stuff just happened," or is it Liz Warren in the basement of the Senate going, "I was just there, and this is what we're doing, and we're doing this," and then it's Cory Booker on MSNBC, and is he saying all the bad things that are happening, or is he advocating on MSNBC, going, "And this is what we're fighting for, and then we're doing this," and it all depends on my headspace.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and then I also have like a bunch of witches in my Instagram talking about like women empowerment. So, and then like lots of funny people. And of course, the Super Bowl Eagles all over there. So, like, sometimes it doesn't feel like doom scrolling. Sometimes I look at Instagram and I see these people and I'm like, I'm there, I'm ready, let's do it. But if my headspace isn't right,
Yeah.
so boundaries. And they
Yeah.
help, going back to just because I knew we need to wrap it up.
Mm.
But when we circle back to writing our own story, we get to make choices. We do not get to make a lot of choices about the big things, but we do get to make choices every single day about a lot of little things.
Right.
And that's how we get to write our story. Um, and I think about when I read books about like, oh, why did they go that way instead of this way? Or why did they make this choice instead of this choice? There are so many tiny little choices, word choices, sentence structure, like in our own lives that we get to make every single day. And so many of them are about the boundaries that we choose to keep. And that is all about the power that we choose to give ourselves and to give other people. And especially right now, it is so important.
Yeah. So we're gonna, I think, wrap up there. Um, do we have homework for the week?
I mean, it's big stuff. It's not any like little stuff. So it's kind of like, where do you need to set a boundary? Is there a place that you can identify? I've shared mine today.
Mm,
Um, is there something that you need to prioritize, or do you need to identify maybe what you do prioritize? Um, but more fun. Where are you getting support from? I think this is the fun one, right? This is what, if you want to ignore the first two, don't ignore the first two. But if you're like, give me something fun to do, Tova and Riley, none of this is fun. Where are you getting support from, or where are you giving support to other people? Because that I think that's what fills me up, to be honest, is like giving support to other people
mm,
and encouraging other people to have hope. And that's leaves me feeling more hopeful. So where are you doing that? And um, is there somewhere in your community? Is there an organization that you're volunteering with? Like, is there just a group of friends that you're always getting together with? And if you haven't seen them in a while, like, can you reach out to them? So make that a priority if you need one priority this week, to reach out to somebody and just kind of shore up that support group or that support network that you have. And if you need folks in your life that are providing support for you, and you need some people in your life that will bring you hope and joy week after week, then think about joining our circle because we would love to see you there every Wednesday, 1 o'clock Eastern time. It is definitely one of our favorite hours of the week, and
yeah.
we would love to have you join us.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, that does it for this week. We will be back next week with another episode on writing your own story. And until then, everyone, have a wonderful, wonderful week.
Thanks so much for listening to We Go Boldly podcast. We know you're busy and we love spending time with you.
If you enjoyed this week's episode, let us know. Head to Apple Podcasts right now to rate and review our show. While you're there, be sure to click that subscribe button.
Want more us time? Follow us on all the socials at Go Boldly Together.
Want even more us time? As in all the coaching pizzazz. Find us at goboldlyinitiative.com for all the info.
We will be back with more excitement, research, and deep thoughts next week.
Until then, keep on being the bold, brave, amazing people we know you already are.
The Power Moms Network, empowering moms to lift the world.